Alright, let's start our Haitian independence unit and just take a little look at this picture and by the end of this unit we should be able to decode and understand a little bit of what's happening because there's a whole lot happening in this picture. So let's get started. First part, we're just going to look at how Santo Domingue, or what was Santo Domingue, what is modern day Haiti, but how it was created as a colony, how it came to be right on the edge of the revolution, so kind of everything up to and the path to the revolt. So part one, the creation of Santo Domingue. Just take a little look at the capital, and we'll take a look at this statue in particular later. Note the machete, but also the horn. Mr. Usher, why are you teaching us this? Why is Haiti important? It's important for a few reasons. One, in that they're significant because they're the first to abolish slavery in the Atlantic world. On either side of the ocean, Europe, Africa, Americas, they're the first to say no to slavery. And that's definitely significant. They are the second independent nation after the United States. They are the first independent black nation in the Americas. And in this case, this is a true revolution, in that and the American Revolution was kind of a revolution, but a lot of things that were happening before stayed the same. In this case, this was a complete economic, political, and social change in the course of 10 years. Everything was turned upside down, an absolute revolution. Very fast change in the economy, in that slavery's out, and the politics, and that they become completely independent, and social as well, with the removal of slavery, but you also get a racial element in that it becomes a truly an only black island when the whites are all murdered out. And so in the course of 10 years, a huge change for the island of Haiti. Overall connections to world history. And here's a little look at the capital, and we'll start to understand why Haiti is the way it is today. And so there's so many little connections. You may not know much about Haiti, you probably don't, but it's just so interconnected, and it results in so many other big things in world history. It's connected to the French Revolution, European conquest, the growth of America. Without Haiti, there would be pretty much no Arizona, no westward expansion, no Louisiana Purchase. And it gives hope for slaves in the region, and throughout the Americas, this is a story of hope and success. This sparks a movement against European colonialism, in that they are the first to really, or they continue this path of breaking away from the Europeans. They are currently the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but they started out as one of the wealthiest, so we'll kind of break down and see how they got there. One of the main reasons as far as why they had this quick turnaround is all infrastructure and production was destroyed. All the factories, all the roads, everything to make that money was destroyed in the revolution. Plus, there was an element of racism in that the entire world just kind of turned its back on this newly black nation. And so they were excluded from trade networks, they were excluded from political support, from all the major powers. Everyone just ignored them for quite a long time, and only now are we starting to take notice. So let's start off with this island. It's the island of Hispaniola. It's Columbus's first main base. So he first landed in San Salvador, which is a little island. We don't know exactly where that island is. It's kind of lost to time because there's just so many little islands. But as far as the first big island, this is Columbus's first big island. And he sets up his base at Santo Domingo and kind of expands over time. But eventually the island does split in half, so that half of it will become Santo Domingue. And so it's just the French way to say Santo Domingo. So Santo Domingue is the French half, which later today is called Haiti, but for the purpose of the rest of this lesson, it's Santo Domingue. And on the over here, this is Santo Domingo, and it's the Spanish side, which becomes the Dominican Republic. And so we'll refer to these as Santo Domingue and Santo Domingo. And it's just that two different languages, the same way to say the same thing. So how did they get there, and what about before Columbus? So before Columbus, people were already here. These were the Tainos, the Native Americans of the Caribbean. And they were ruled by caciques, or chiefs. Before Columbus, there were between 500,000 to 1 million Tainos just in Hispaniola. But the Taino people, they spread across the Caribbean, so they're in Cuba and across many of the major islands as well. These would have been the first natives, the first Americans seen by Columbus. But as a result of a lot of the policies, disease, and just the horrible work environments and brutality that Columbus brings, the population drops quickly to 60,000 by 1509. So imagine going from 1 million people down to 60,000. The population of Phoenix down to the population of Laveen in a very short time. And so by 1509, it's just a matter of about 20 years, they were nearly wiped out from these harsh conditions of slavery. They're all enslaved and put into gold mines in brutal conditions that result in so much death. In the case of the Spanish will intermarry with a lot of the indigenous women, and this creates a new mestizo or mixed population that we see throughout Latin America, people of mixed Spanish and native blood. And so here's this kind of first meeting, at least somebody's image of this first meeting. European settlement, there's not too much gold in the Caribbean, so pretty quickly the gold mines are exhausted and they can't, no matter how many Taino people they keep forcing into the mines and murdering, they're not going to get more gold. And so eventually they have to figure out other ways to make money off this island. And so they turn to cattle and sugar as new big ways to make money. And so they start to raise the cows. That's pretty easy. The sugar is a lot of work. It's a very labor-intensive process to make the sugar that we all enjoy today. It requires a lot of work. And so they needed people to do that work because the Tainos were dying off. And so African slaves were brought in to replace the Taino population. And so this starts in 1502. 12,000 slaves were brought in by 1546. And it works pretty well. It creates an economic boom to trade sugar and cowhides for whatever Spain was producing, Spanish manufactured goods. And so Santo Domingo becomes a key port in the Spanish Empire. And so it's just a big important note here in that originally it was the Tainos used as slave labor, but because of disease and just severe abuse, they're nearly wiped out. Not completely wiped out, but nearly wiped out. And this is where we get these the slave population brought in. We've talked a bit about slavery already. So it works. They make good money off of cows and sugar. Columbus goes back to Europe with piles of gold. He comes back to Europe with Taino slaves. And he starts to come back with cows and sugar. And so he's making big money. And the rest of Europe takes notice. And so all the other Europeans, the French, the English, the Dutch, they figured it's time for them to explore too. And so they all send their own explorers to claim land. But it also is going to spark wars to disrupt trade through piracy, and that all this money is being made, and without a strong navy, it'd be easy for someone to come along and just take a ship and steal that money. And so this becomes the golden age of piracy, where people are going to sweep in and try to steal whatever they can, whatever's being brought across the ocean. And so, with so many pirates around Hispaniola, Spain decides to move its navy to the safer port in Havana, Cuba, and that Santo Domingo was no longer safe, with all these pirates swarming around the island, trying to steal whatever they could. And so eventually Santo Domingo loses trade out of fear of pirate attacks and just becomes isolated, and Cuba starts to grow while Santo Domingo shrinks because they're just surrounded by all these pirates. And so eventually the pirates start to settle in the western half of the island of Hispaniola by the early 1600s. So what becomes Haiti starts to be really settled in by all these pirates, and that they weren't making much money by stealing from Santo Domingo, so they settle down. And some of these early people are just runaways, that they jump ship, got tired of life on the sea, and so they jump ship, land on the island, and they start to hunt for wild livestock. And so any wild cows that were going around, they're going to hunt down those cows, and they smoke those cows on the beach to turn into kind of beef jerky. And this is where we get the phrase buccaneers, because bucan it's a type of smoked meat, and that they're smoking the meat. And so these are buccaneers. But they're also smuggling whatever they can, getting past tax agents, and they'll trade with passing ships, whatever this smoked meat is that they're creating, these buccaneers. Spanish colonial administrators start to force the Spanish population to move closer to the city of Santo Domingo. So instead of spreading out across the island, they concentrate on just that city, because these pirates are spreading out across the island, killing all the cows, and continuing to grow and grow and grow. So they hope to limit this illegal trade with the pirates. But this means that a whole lot of the islands open for settlement, and so all these pirates start to move in and take over this open land. And a lot of these pirates are French, and so they need to make money, and so they're figuring out other ways to make money, so they bring in tobacco, indigo, coffee, and sugar, and bring in a kind of plantation-style economy to make their money. This brings in and increases the slave trade, and instead of decreasing trade, like the Spanish hoped by just focusing on the city, trade with the Spanish side increases. And eventually, France and Spain start to fight each other, until finally, under the Treaty of Ryswick, the island is split in half. France gets half, and Spain gets half. So, life at this point, by the mid-1700s, they are the world's largest sugar exporter. They're making and producing the most sugar out of anywhere on the planet. And it's a smallish island, and so they're getting a lot of work out of this soil. But they are working, quite literally, their slaves to death. And so this requires a constant inflow of new slaves. So this is not like an American style of slavery. Haitian style of slavery is incredibly brutal. It produces a whole lot of money, but it requires new slaves because they are having pretty short lifespans. We'll talk about why. The growth in their economy and slavery in the late 1700s may have sparked these early revolts, and that they were making a whole lot of money in slavery, and it's time for change. And so Santo Domingo was producing a whole lot of sugar. This sugar was sent to France, and then from there, sugar was this new luxury item. It was very expensive. Only the rich could afford it. But as more and more of this sugar was produced, it started to get cheaper. And then because it's cheaper, now the average person can eat sugar, and just demand increases. And so both supply and demand of sugar is increasing, so this is good money. And eventually this becomes a huge part of the French economy. It becomes essential to the French economy to keep hold of this island and keep on making that sugar. And so the entire infrastructure, the roads, the factories, the ports, everything is built around sugar and to support these plantations to make sugar, because everybody in the world wants more and more sugar as this new big thing. And so they're clearing out forests, so a lot of their beautiful forests are wiped out to create more and more plantations to make more sugar, to make more money. And so this is a little bit different than the American style of settlement that we talked about with the United States. This is a colony just for money, not really residents. And so the French people really weren't moving in to live in Haiti. Haiti's sole purpose was to make money. And so it's a colony for production, not residents. And so planters would hire managers, so they'd hire kind of a middle-class white manager while they live in France. So the owner of a plantation likely would not even live on the plantation. He would just hire somebody to run it and then go back and live in France, and they bring in the money. And only planters that would actually be born there would live on their own plantations. Otherwise, somebody would do it for them. They would just own the property. By 1791, we started to get an imbalance of 32,000 white people ruling over 500,000 slaves. And so they are very much outnumbered, which is going to be bad for the white people in this case. And so wealth is measured by the amount of slaves owned. The wealthier you are, the more slaves you need to produce more sugar to make more money, to buy more slaves. And it's all this kind of loop. But we're definitely getting an imbalance here, as French people are not moving in to balance out the slaves that are brought over. And so how was life for the slaves? 700,000 are brought over between 1700 to 1791, and they're going to bring in their own West African religion, their own politics, their agriculture, their own military tactics. And we're going to see this in the revolution. They're going to use certain West African styles of fighting and planning attacks in these fights. It's incredibly dangerous work in the mills and the fields. And in many cases, it's simply cheaper to work them to death. The average slave will live about 3 years. Once they're on that island, they're going to get 3 years of work out of them. From either disease hits them, they're worked to death, or some accident happens or they commit suicide. And so because they're producing so much sugar, and they're often giving these people 48-hour shifts, and it's just incredibly dangerous. One example of this extreme danger would be you have to cut down the sugar, which is hard enough work on its own, and while cutting down the sugar, you're going to be exposed to all sorts of diseases. But then you have to squeeze the sugar through this kind of mangler, and in a lot of cases, if an arm or a leg gets stuck in the mangler, they're going to chop the arm and leg off, and then likely you're going to die of some disease or some infection. And so other problems, after you get this kind of sugar juice, this molasses, you have to boil it down, to turn it into molasses. And these incredibly hot pots, often if somebody's working a 48-hour shift and they fall in, they're going to get their skin burned off. So it's a really hard life here. Let's take a little break there.